Hello, everyone. Welcome back into MLS Digest. I'm Camille, your host, and we're here to preview Week 23 of MLS action. We got a full slate this coming weekend, July 12th and 13th. We also had a lot of midweek action. We had US Open Cup quarterfinals, Canadian Championship quarterfinals, and a couple of rescheduled MLS games for Miami and LAFC, who were in the Club World Cup and had makeup games in midweek ahead of this slate. So a decent amount of teams dealing with midweek action ahead of this weekend slate. So they'll be on a bit of short rest, a bit of rotation, maybe expected as far as their lineups. But of course, we'll go through all the teams that played midweek, the results, how that might affect their matchups in this weekend's slate. And of course, everything else you need to know with lineups, predictions, and of course, I'll be giving out a couple of my favorite best bets for the slate if you're interested in that. Please make sure to like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you're new here and enjoy the content. I really appreciate your support. And let's get into everything you need to know for Week 23. To start the slate off, it's Charlotte hosting NYC. And it's already the first play of the show, the first best bet. And I'm going with Charlotte on the money line at plus 110. I think this is amazing value. Charlotte, of course, has been just slid down the standings the past couple of months, and they've been struggling to hold clean sheets. And a large part of that has been on the road, but also last week on 4th of July weekend, they choked a 2-0 lead at home to Orlando, a game that they were not expected to win, but then ended up going up through one great goal from Pep Biel and then a second on a bit of a scrum, but then completely capitulated. And they had Zaha suspended in that game, Tim Ream still not back, and then also Abada coming off the bench. But eventually, Orlando got that tie, and that just added to these woes for Charlotte. But regardless, Charlotte is still 6-1-2 at home. And against this NYC side, that will be getting back Freese, Martinez. Martinez actually did come back for that Toronto game, didn't score. I just don't really like this NYCFC team on the road. Yes, NYC is above Charlotte in the standings right now, which is pretty crazy to think. And they're sitting in like 7th or 6th at the moment. But once again, that's largely been due to their home form. They've been beating up on a lot of really bad teams, especially at home. You look at Atlanta, Toronto, and then they lose on the road to Montreal of all teams. So, and they've lost twice to Montreal. They've given Montreal, I think, 2 of its 3 or 4 wins on this season. So it's a completely different team, home and away. You could say the same for Charlotte, but we're getting Charlotte at home here. They're going to get all these players back that they've been missing from the international tournaments. And I just think it's a really good price. You still have Malanda as well, one of their top center backs, has rumors to go to PSV in the Dutch league. But as we've seen with the Ajamang situation, who's about to go to Derby County, and that deal's been kind of stalled a little bit, but it's probably going to happen. He's still been playing, or he's still going to be expected to play by Charlotte's front office and whatever. They're still technically considering them their players until these deals officially get over the line. So I don't see, specifically with Malanda, those rumors deterring him from sitting out or making him sit out for this game or upcoming games. And we'll see about Ajamang. But even if Ajamang doesn't start and that deal actually gets over the line in the coming days, Toklamati has been, by the numbers and the eye test, has been a pretty solid replacement in the time that Ajamang has been out for Gold Cup anyway. So I still think Charlotte is the superior team in this one. They got to get their home fortress kind of back into place. They still have a very solid record there nonetheless, and this probably won't be a pretty result, but I think Charlotte gets it done, maybe locks it down a little bit more than you've been seeing in the past couple of results, and I'm just not worried about this NYC team. Moving on, we get the Hell is Real Derby. This is the second one of the season. The last one was 1-1 over in Columbus, and also the previous meeting before that was also a draw 0-0. So these teams are still fighting for bragging rights, especially this season. And for the second best bet, it's going to be a 2-legger. I'm going to take a little bit of a less riskier approach on this one because this Derby has, in a sense, not delivered on the goal side of things the past couple of matchups, which I've mentioned. And, you know, I'm going with the both to score in this one because Cincinnati, they've been in really good form, right? You see the 4 straight wins there in MLS. But they've also been giving up goals. And they're still missing Haglund. He's been missing since that Atlanta game where he got injured. Nwobodo is obviously going to be out. And on the Cruise side of things, they do have scoring issues. They do have limits as far as that top end, just killer ability compared to last season, right? When they had Cucho, Ramirez, and they still do the business as far as some results go, but it's not always as, they're not really running up the score as often. It's not as clinical, right? But with Cincinnati's kind of issues on that back line, and with the Crew also kind of missing their 2 top goalkeepers still. Bush, I think, still expected to be starting. Then you have a couple center backs out, maybe not top, but a bit of not full strength on that back line. And then you also have Aliyu and Shambost also picking up knocks, which could hurt that attack a little bit. But I still think both of these teams are too good to keep the other off the scoreboard. And we could get another situation like that where maybe we see great chances. I think there would be great chances in this game. Like, these two teams are going to be going at it. And also in those previous 2 results that have been 1-1, 0-0, you've seen great chances, but the finishing, for whatever reason, just wasn't there on the day. So I want to kind of avoid maybe getting ahead of myself and expecting too much of this matchup, because I think it will still deliver from like an entertainment value standpoint. But I think both the score is the right way to go about this one. It's hard to really call, right, who's favored to take the 3 points. Cincinnati being at home is key in this one. And it's been a while since they beat the Crew, specifically at home. They beat the Crew. I think the last time a team won in this was Cincinnati beating the Crew on the road last season. So I don't think we're gonna see a draw in this one, but it's really hard to predict who's gonna be on their day, because Columbus also traveling from Seattle, where that second half really stalled out when it was 1-1 going into the second half. And who knows how their legs are. They don't really have too much depth as far as the rotation, so you shouldn't really see too much of a change in the lineup. But for the first leg of this second best bet, I'm going to trust both to score. I'm going to give Cincinnati the edge as far as who can potentially come out with the 3 points. Next up, it's the Union hosting the Red Bulls. And these teams were supposed to meet the other day, midweek, for the US Open Cup quarterfinals in Philly as well. So these teams would have been playing back-to-back games against each other in Philly. But there was crazy heavy rainstorms on Wednesday for the matchup, and it got postponed, rescheduled. I'm not sure when that new date is set for, but regardless, they're going to have to play that out, meaning that they're going to get normal rest heading into this game. And you also have the prospect of Baribo finally coming back, because they did have it was being planned to play, and then basically around kickoff time was when it started really raining and kept getting delayed, and then eventually postponed. So we saw the starting lineup graphics and who was going to play and all that. And Ty Baribo was finally back after picking up a bit of an injury, which I believe he got on international duty. So that's a great sign for the Union. And they're looking relatively healthy at the moment as far as their lineup goes. Damiani has been getting a lot of starts. Ura, we'll see if he makes this probably the bench for this game. So it's probably going to be Baribo, Damiani. But they have been struggling, attacking recently, and that could boil down to all the players they have for Gold Cup, etc., and Baribo being injured. But I think it's going to take still a game or two for them to really start clicking fully again. And the Red Bulls aren't really slouches as far as, defensively, right? The Union as well, especially at home, they've been really locked down. Carnell's has just been playing a really balanced style. That's why they're, of course, towards the top of the East and one of the best teams in the league at the moment. But they have suffered back-to-back 1-0 losses. And the Red Bulls, defensively, I think they aren't slouches. Attacking, I'm still not convinced by this team. Yes, they've been getting these draws, but I just don't think they really have too much of a chance in this one unless they can keep things really, really tight and keep this lower scoring. And I think that's probably the way it's going to go. The Union, once again, aren't entering this game really in the best form on the attacking side of things. And with that full rest, right, no midweek action, normal rest, I think for this game, we're going to get under 3.5 goals. So that's the second leg of this second best bet paired with that both to score in the Cincy Columbus matchup. We get that plus 112 combined. So the main line for this game is actually 2.5, which is just a really rare sight, obviously, in MLS. So I'm going to take that extra goal. I think the Union probably win this one around 1 or 2-0. I really don't see the Red Bulls threatening Philly because Philly, despite their issues going forward at the moment, are once again really solid defensively. They're just a really balanced team. And yeah, the Red Bulls have just been getting points here and there against, average opposition to low opposition at the best, and in certain situations. So this is not a matchup that I really like the Red Bulls in, but I think they can keep it respectful as far as the scoreline. And it's going to be frustrating for either team to find the back of the net in this one. So that's where I'm going with. And that'll be it for the second best bet. Moving on, it's a really interesting matchup between Miami and Nashville. These are two of arguably the hottest teams in the league. Nashville continues this unbeaten run, including in the fact that they just played in the Open Cup quarterfinals and advanced against DC United. DC gave them a real scare in the beginning, going up 2-0 inside the first 15 or so minutes before Nashville got a really weird goal on DC kind of playing out of the back and it deflecting into Nashville attackers' path in the box. And then they just ran rampant from there, tied it up through a surge penalty, and then just clicking in that possession-based style. They were just relentless coming out of halftime especially, and just wiped the floor with DC in that final half. And they're moving on. And once again, it continues this great run of form. This team is absolutely cooking, especially Surridge. He's leading the Golden Boot race. But Miami has Messi, of course, and he's been in some unbelievable form going back from before the Club World Cup started, because Miami competed in that. And then now in the two matches since, Messi has been carrying that form. He's carrying some kind of, vengeance, and he's putting away, well, at the moment, the Eastern Conference he put away Montreal, who's obviously the worst team in the East by the standings, and then did it all against New England midweek as well. So both these teams played midweek. He scored both goals in that one, and he's second now in the Golden Boot standings. So this is an interesting one because there is potentially storms on the day. They might fade ahead of the match time of the start. And the fact that, of course, both these teams have played midweek. They both are having to travel down to Miami because Miami played in New England at Montreal on the weekend and have to come back home now from there. So it's still a travel back. Nashville, of course, played at home both midweek and last weekend. Got a couple of wins. So we'll see if there's any rotation. Because that could, of course, have an effect. It's not like Nashville had to go extra time like some other teams in Open Cup did, which we'll get to. But this one should be fireworks. I was considering kind of dumbing this game down to a lower total, like a 2.5 or maybe both a score, and pairing it with something like I did for the second best bet like we had, something along those lines. But this might be a game that I need to sit on for a bit, and I do expect goals, but I would like to see the lineups ahead of this one because this is one of those couple of games on this big main slate that has two teams who played midweek, because Miami was playing a makeup game because they had to play in the Club World Cup, so they would have played New England before, but they had to play Wednesday. So, I mean, both teams are in just such good form that it probably shouldn't matter, but Nashville is still having Zimmerman back. He played like literally only a couple of minutes and he scored the 5th goal, I think it was, against DC. Coming off the bench finally. So probably not, fit enough for a start right away after that. So there's a lot of factors in this one, and I still think there should be goals. As far as the bet goes, I'll probably have to add that on the Twitter or whatever once it comes around the game time. I just want to think about it a little bit, but my gut feeling is that this one should have goals. This should be a fun matchup against two of the hottest teams, and it's really hard to separate them. So I'm going to be boring and say this one's a draw. I'm going to go 2-2. Moving on, it's another Eastern matchup in the early window, and it's Orlando hosting Montreal. Montreal's just shipping goals to anyone for fun at this rate, right? Like, this team is terrible. They have some young pieces, but once again, there's no ambition. They're not going to make some random run. They'll probably pick up points here and there, but Vrioni's been injured for like half the season, if not more. He's shown some good flashes when he's playing, but we haven't seen that two-striker system with Owusu too much. Owusu's been another bright spot sometimes. He got the goal that Messi literally just served him on a platter before Messi went berserk the rest of the match on his end of things to gift, because he gifted the Montreal goal. And it's like, how can you literally have any reason to support Montreal, like, other than just the fact that they have an amazing price in this game as far as the betting odds go? Because like, I that's the only thing that warrants it, is just like literally you don't bet the team, you bet the numbers or whatever. But Orlando here, I mean, they've been in a iffy form, but they have also been playing some pretty decent opposition, right? They lost to Cincy at home, okay. But their attack is still scoring, right? They're still kind of holding up their end of the bargain. They just came back against Charlotte from 2-0 down. Yes, they should have made it far easier and probably won that match when you look at the lineups pre-match, since Charlotte was much more rotated, even though Orlando was on the road. But yeah, I mean, this Orlando attack is just clicking. You could see, especially in that second half against Charlotte, like, we had them double chance in one of our plays last week in that Charlotte match, and that was one of the matches I was actually watching, in full almost. And that second half from Orlando, like, that's when they're at their peak. Like, they are absolutely clicking. They were relentless. They were taking the space in behind. Their chemistry, that front line is unbelievable when they're actually on their game, and which is often. So I don't want to say it like that, because I hate that phrase, like, on their day, on this guy's day, he's equal to this guy. Well, if he was on his day often, then he would be considered better, but he's not. He's on his day 20% of the time. Anyways, sidebar. The point is that this Orlando attack is clicking more often than not, and I just don't see how this Montreal side can contend. The only thing for Orlando hurting them in this one is that, of course, Galese and Janssen, so your starting center back and goalkeeper, are both suspended for this one with yellow card accumulation. Other than that, there's really nothing new. Like, everyone else is healthy, so it probably should be a high-scoring game, but Orlando will take it. Probably shouldn't trust them to hold a clean sheet in this one, considering those injuries. But Montreal, like, I wouldn't be surprised if they get shut out anyways. And they also, I forgot to mention, they also just lost midweek to Forge, one of the Canadian League teams, in the Canadian Championship quarterfinals. They were down entering that second leg, and they tied their home leg, so they lost on aggregate. So once again, Montreal as well played midweek, has the extra or less rest, extra travel. Honestly, should just be putting Orlando money line in like all of your parlays or whatever, but I mean, wouldn't blame you. I'm not, this might be another one that I reconsider as far as maybe adding it to like a 2-leg play, but yeah, I mean, this should be pretty straightforward for the home side. Next up, it's Toronto hosting Atlanta. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this one because both these teams are awful. Atlanta, of course, has the more talent, but just, I mean, we're 23 games in, guys. Like, I'm not, I'm not gonna try and like give a pep talk here for this team when they don't really seem like they care the rest of this season, right? So Toronto's been abysmal. They just lost 3-1 at NYC. Their home form has been just as bad, right? They did beat Portland out of the blue, honestly, in their last home matchup. They've parted ways with Insigne and Bernadeschi, so that's maybe a positive as far as the morale of the team and the future, but not as far as this season goes, honestly, because the lineup is just, it's terrible. Like, there's very little talent. And you also have guys like Osorio still coming back from some knocks. Don't expect them to be ready. And Atlanta, I mean, yes, they got Muyumba back last game for like 15 minutes or whatever, so probably not going to start right away, right? Probably needs another game off the bench or something, and that hurts your defensive midfield. But you still have Gregerson, Williams, still potentially or likely continuing to be injured and not have any playing time. Like, this is one where like the first goal is just gonna sink the other team, I feel like, and I just don't want to be like, I just don't want to be involved. Like, this is, I'm like done with it. Like, I just don't want to touch Atlanta games. Like, they just don't inspire you, right? So this is one you throw away. Like, whatever the result is, I'm really not going to take too much away from it, right? Because you're only beating up on another team that's just as bad and has like no chance of. I mean, Atlanta probably has a bit of a chance just as far as the numbers and the standings go. Just because like they can, if they string like 3 wins together out of the blue, like you're already in contention for a play-in spot. But I don't. Yeah, I'm just tired of it. I'm gonna go for a 2-1 Atlanta win. But once again, that's just based on the rosters, right? Because there's no clear evidence that they're going to change their style of play, that they're going to be more effective. And Latte Latte honestly has been ghosting as well recently. So yeah, but still, I'm going to take Atlanta because Toronto's home form has been just that bit worse, but both should probably get a goal on each other, and Atlanta gets the win. Next up, it's a cross-conference matchup. Austin takes on New England. Austin somehow, some way got through to the Open Cup semis, and they got 2 penalty kicks in that match against San Jose. It was 1-1 heading into extra time, then 2-2 heading into penalties, and they eventually won on penalties, and Stuver showed up, of course, and they're on shorter rest too, but New England just as well played that makeup game against Miami midweek, so neither of these teams with that normal bit of rest, and New England coming off a loss. They now have 4 losses in the last 5 after a double-digit unbeaten run, and so this team is really becoming streaky, it feels like, and it's really hard to figure out when they're going to reverse it, right? Get back on track. And this game to me just screams draw. It just screams like 1-1. I mean, Austin games in general, right, don't have many goals. And the first goal, of course, is crucial to Austin's play style, right? And because they can't really come back because their strengths are not there, right, to kind of break down teams in possession, right? When a team, especially like a team like New England, if they do take the first goal, they're really going to bunker and feel comfortable about it. So it's really difficult. I think an under could be a good look here. But yeah, I mean, both these teams are relatively healthy as far as the lineups go. Austin specifically, I feel like they have depth, but they just literally like don't. Like, Estevez just does not change this line. Like, he's running guys into the ground like all season. But we'll see if this maybe changes that a little bit, because now they're into the semis. You don't want to risk too many injuries. And Uzuni specifically hasn't been getting starts recently, so maybe you see him finally start here. So that might be the one bit of rotation we see as far as this lineup goes. But yeah, of course, they're still in contention for some of those lower playoff spots. And, you know, there's going to be nothing different about this Austin team down the stretch. It feels like they're just going to take their game by game, try and get their ugly wins. But yeah, I just don't see much separating these two teams. It probably should be low energy because of the fact, you know, Austin has to come back from San Jose on less rest, and New England as well coming down, losing to Miami. Messi just carrying them past New England. So that's been a key theme in a lot of Austin games, especially at home this year, 1-1s. And I'm just going to roll with that. We shouldn't expect too much divergence. Next up is another cross-conference battle, and the Fire host San Diego. This is a really interesting matchup. The Fire had a midweek U.S. Open Cup quarterfinal game. They did not advance. They lost to Minnesota after extra time, and they got a red card like 25 or so minutes in. Then 2 minutes later had a penalty for them, so they went up 1-0 and had to play the next 65 minutes of regular time down a man. Minnesota got a goal like 2 minutes into the second half and just kept pushing. Chicago honestly had some decent looking counterattacking opportunities despite being down a man, but then eventually the last like 20 minutes obviously parked the bus, and Minnesota eventually found its way in extra time, winning 3-1. And Chicago, of course, playing literally like almost 100 minutes down a man. And so that's going to take its toll here. They also picked up even more injuries to an already battered team, it feels like, especially in the defensive midfield backline situation. Sam Rogers, who's been a good presence on that backline, pulled his hamstring. Also, Davila was cramping at the end of, or in extra time, because he played a full 90. Kellen Acosta wasn't training ahead of that match. We'll see if he can come back, but also you're kind of getting into some real, you know, reserve depth here as far as that chain between the defensive mid and center backs go. And you just also had a lot of players, right, getting a good chunk of minutes, even if they were rotated and didn't start, because the reserves eventually came on and played around 40 minutes, you know, from the end of regular time to extra time. And so the team's going to be tired. They have not been good at home whatsoever for whatever reason. They're just one of those teams that has not put it together at home. The Fire are 2 wins, 4 draws, and 3 losses at home. And the San Diego side, just as well. I mean, look at those score lines. They've just been in some absolute barn burners, and especially that game against Houston, they just completely let it slip away. Went up, I think it was 3-2 after going down 1-2, and then just, I mean, the goals Houston were scoring were insane. I mean, we had San Diego in that one, and I just can't win a bet when Houston is involved, it seems like. But San Diego is going to be a bit better here. They got Godoy back for that last game. They're finally getting Luca De La Torre back. And so that midfield is going to be fully ready to go. Yes, they do have defensive problems. And yes, this probably should be a higher scoring game because the Fire are involved. And that's just usually, you know, what it tends to lead to. But the Fire are going to be tired. I don't think they're going to be able to have as much effectiveness in their style against San Diego. San Diego's going to have a lot of the ball, as we know, and they're going to be the more rested teams because Chicago had the midweek game. So even though they're traveling here for this one from the West Coast, losing a couple hours or whatnot, I think this best bet number 3, where we're taking San Diego on the draw no bet at -110. I think it's a really good look. San Diego admittedly has 6 wins, 0 draws, and 4 losses on the road, so it's really been one way or the other, right? We haven't seen them get draws. So you could say, why aren't I just going with money line? But I do want to protect just in case, because the Fire could make this an ugly game, one of those random like 0-0s where they somehow hold on against the San Diego team that just keeps prodding and passing and trying to break through like Minnesota did, but just took that extra bit of time. But I think San Diego once again should control this game, and Chicago's home form as well just doesn't inspire much confidence. I mean, San Diego's defensive form at the moment also doesn't, but I think they're just the far superior team at the moment. They're tactically should just run circles around this Fire team, and yeah, I think maybe, at worst we could see San Diego's first road draw. But yeah, the Fire's attack especially just has not been potent at home, and they're coming off a really bad loss as far as just how it affects this team's kind of, I mean, not the whole season, but you get out of a cup that they really were pushing to win, and just right away it's going to be really hard to recover from that, especially because of the situation they were tasked with the man down and the short rest. I just don't see how the Fire can turn this around immediately and really have the energy to deal with this really relentless San Diego side in possession. Moving forward, we're into the western part of the slate, the later night slate, and we got Kansas City hosting the Sounders. Kansas City beat Colorado on the road in one of the earlier, I think it was a Friday game on the 4th of July weekend, and Seattle had a 1-1 draw against the Crew, and that match had to be basically ended early. It's not like they're going to play the rest out, but they were into stoppage time, I believe, when Stephen Fry suffered a really nasty collision type of head injury and had to be taken to the hospital, and the two teams just agreed to end the game, even though there was maybe a couple minutes of stoppage time left. And so here you have two teams on normal rest, and Seattle as well, dealing with a couple of injuries besides Fry, who should definitely not be back in time for this game. Probably has to go through some sort of concussion protocol. But Kosteriense is going to be suspended, and you also have just the center back depth being pretty thin. I think you had Alex Rodon playing right center back last game, which is nuts. But they held on against a really, really poor Crew side on the day that was just didn't have that energy, couldn't keep possession either. Against the Seattle side, of course, loves to keep possession. But from an attacking standpoint, Seattle's pretty fit now, right? You've had these knocks among this entire front line most of the season, but they've been pretty healthy the past several games. And despite Kansas City's really good season they've been having, honestly, since the coaching change, right? If you just take out that first segment of the season, you would say I feel like they would be in a play-in spot or something like that if it was just from that point on and you only counted those points. But despite all that, I think Seattle should probably just handle business here, especially on the road. They just seem to really keep things at a minimum. They keep the chances at a minimum anyways. They keep the possession. Kansas City is going to be missing Bartlett and Radoja, who's been out for a bit of time. So in that kind of midfield, defensive midfield, I think Seattle probably should do it. But, it's just, I don't know, man. It's just the face value of this team. That's the only reason that's kind of pushing me over the line. But at the same time, this attack is healthy. And what I mean is just that it probably won't be a pretty match to watch. They never do really make it. But they do have that combination play, that chemistry, and just the quality against Kansas City to really pick them apart. So I think it's probably going to be a 2-0 Sounders win. and Kansas City kind of dies down a bit as far as that form goes. I think the level between these two teams is just a little bit too much. Next up, it's Minnesota hosting the Quakes. Both these teams played in Open Cup midweek. Minnesota was the one that advanced against the Fire after extra time. Meanwhile, the Quakes lost to Austin on penalties, and so they went crashing out, and they've been getting a lot of draws lately. These 1-1 draws. They had a 1-1 draw in that Austin game in regular time. It went 2-2 into penalties, and then they lost, right? So, both teams on short rest. Minnesota gets to stay at home because they played the Open Cup game at home as well. So you have to give them the edge. And I think that just tactically they should, kind of take advantage of the Quakes and the fact that they've now lost Lopez on that loan. They're going to be rotated a bit here. That midfield outside of Espinoza really isn't, no one's really stepping up outside of that. And Espinoza as well had to get stitches just above his knee, and he came on for a bit and then got injured because of that. So we'll see if that's really any type of injury that affects his movement, or if it's just that pain there as far as the stitches or whatnot, if he can go for this one. Because if he could, if it's fine, then he's going to start, because once again he was rested for the cup match. But this is one where these teams played early on in the season in San Jose. Minnesota got a 1-0 win, really failed to kill the game off, and choked some really promising counterattacking opportunities to put it away. And then the Quakes made it really, really scrappy. They couldn't get the goal. And at home, though, I'm debating whether the Quakes will kind of give Minnesota its own medicine, as far as maybe just giving them the ball, and trying to do what Minnesota does, because I don't think they're going to have the energy here to really take the game, to Minnesota, because that's just going to play into Minnesota's hands, who would love to get on the break and kind of put this one away early, and then just kind of get by, do the right things. So this is one where tactically I feel like it could be different than what we're used to as far as what San Jose is willing to allow Minnesota to do, and the lineups. I think lineup-wise, Minnesota probably should still be all right, but I want to wait for lineups on this one as well, because I do like Minnesota still at home in this one. They have the advantage, especially with both playing midweek. And this is another one that I could be targeting as far as an additional play. So I'm going to still hold my tongue on this one for a bet, but I think Minnesota gets by once again, and the Quakes at the moment aren't really, they're kind of spiraling a little bit. Yeah, they're getting the draws, but with the personnel they're going to have out there, I just don't think they can match with Minnesota's depth and the style. So I'm going to go for a 2-0 Loons win. Next up, it's Colorado hosting Vancouver. These two teams met earlier this season in Vancouver, and Vancouver just rolled by the Rapids. The Rapids, of course, really struggle to retain possession. The Whitecaps, of course, love to pick you apart with it. And the Rapids had a midweek makeup game against LAFC where Travis, the left back, got a red card 10 minutes in, and that just, of course, that's been too prominent of a theme for this Rapids team. I feel like they get a red card every 2 or 3 games, and it just kills their prospects of a result when they're actually playing okay. I mean, in this case, it was so early on in the game, so it I can't say that they would have had a chance anyways, because LAFC has specifically just owned them anyways when LAFC has played at home against them. But yeah, they lost 3-0, and they come back home here against the Whitecaps. Whitecaps really tried to make a mess of their Canadian Championship quarterfinal against Valor FC. In the second leg, it was 2-2 after the first leg. On Wednesday, they came back home for that second leg, and they had Brian White back, they had Nelson starting, and a bit more of the top lineup, right? Even though Kubas and what's his name, Ahmed, have been out for with their own separate injuries, and they tried to. They were on the right path as far as the play went, but the timing and the tempo sometimes weren't to their expectations or what the standard is for them this season, right? And that's why they've been so good in possession. And it took until like the 80th minute for them to score. Then they gave up a really ugly corner goal like 5 minutes later. But then they kind of flipped that switch, kind of forgot about that, and still found a way to win in normal time on a crossed-in ball by Nelson for Utvik for a header. And so they advanced to the Canadian Championship semifinals, and they're definitely not at the moment with the same confidence, like the same team, the same Vancouver team we saw pre-Champions Cup final, because 3 losses in their last 4 MLS games, and that's been down to some personnel, of course, but now they're getting these players back, and I'm not really too worried about potential rotation or anything like that, because the players who have come back, especially White, didn't really play too much for their countries in the Gold Cup, and so he's gonna be running out there for this game as well. And I think at worst here we see the Whitecaps draw. I think this is by the odds, this is literally a 50-50 as far as the odds go, because the Whitecaps, I think, of course, tactically are the superior team, and the Rapids as well at home have been really, really disappointing. They have 5 wins, 2 draws, and 5 losses. Meanwhile, of course, the Whitecaps have been one of the best away teams. Obviously, one of the best teams in general, right? Because they only have so many losses on the season. But most of us have come recently. But they have been against pretty good opposition, right? The Crew, San Diego, in a time where they were dealing with so many players out. So I think they're going to return to a bit of form here, and just avoid the loss. So that's where I'm going with for the 4th best bet. It's going to be the first leg of a 2-legger. So the first leg here is Whitecaps plus 0.5 or double chance. So they just have to at least draw. And I don't think that's too big of an ask when they're going to be, of course, dictating the play, possessing the ball, and a Rapid side that is still missing Zach Steffen and is now without really a true left back with Travis out and Vine. So you're probably going to have like Rosenberry play left back in his stead. So once again, this Rapids attack, if they can't really have the ball, they really have been disappointing, and I just think they're going to be completely outmatched. And but still, at the same time, this Whitecaps team, the clinicalness hasn't really been there, right? It hasn't been so convincing, and that Valor game really kind of shows that they have to kind of trudge along still, maybe another game or two before they're really back into some top form, top chemistry, and all of that. So I'm going to pump the brakes on a draw no bet or a win, but I think they can avoid a loss here against a really inconsistent Rapid side. Next up, it's LAFC hosting Dallas. LAFC played midweek in that makeup game, beat the Rapids like we just talked about. That should say win, not L to Colorado. But regardless, they host Dallas. And Dallas, of course, 3 losses in a row, all of those being at home. And for whatever reason, they're just a completely different team in that regard from last year. Their home form now is terrible. Their away form, though, is almost essentially top. They have double the goals they've scored on the road compared to home. They've scored 18 on the road and 9 at home. So they've been a far superior team as far as the attack goes, but they've still been giving up goals just as much. 18 on the road and 18 at home and 19 on the road. LAFC, they now have Dilrosun from Club America. He only has like a couple of weeks left on this loan or whatever it is, but he finally just got his first goal against the Rapids, and so now he's officially going to be playing that right wing, whether that be him or Martinez in this next game, whatever. But with Giroud gone, I actually like this LAFC side to just be a little bit more sure of itself as far as what the formation or the attack goes, because now you have either Ordaz or Bobasi at that starting striker, and that just fits this team more than having to rotate and try and fit Giroud in this entire time, which has really hurt them because he just never fit their play style. And that's nothing against him, but it's just the reality of the situation. So LAFC at home, on the flip side of what we talked about with Dallas on the road, LAFC has been almost impeccable at home. 7 wins, 1 draw, 2 losses. They're heavy favorites in this one for a reason, and that's why I'm combining it with that Whitecaps plus 0.5. I'm taking LAFC on the money line in this 2-legger. We get plus 113 odds combined. Let's not make it too complicated, right? I mean, Dallas still likely missing their top center back. Anderson Julio still dealing with a bit of an injury. And, I even with the midweek game for LAFC, they've gotten to stay at home. And Dallas, once again, doesn't possess a lot of the ball. They're going to have to find a random moment, potentially. Like, that's really what they're banking on, is finding a random moment, slip up, turnover from LAFC, because LAFC, as much as we talk about how much they're a counterattacking team or they love to work into space, especially Bouanga, they have been one of the top possession teams this entire season, and they've been getting better at that as far as being comfortable with finding different ways to combine and get these other players involved for goals. So I'm going to trust LAFC once again to do the business at home. Dallas could score for sure, but still, this is a pretty bad defensive side, and LAFC plays a pretty risk-averse game, especially in their possession, and will likely make pretty easy work of this Dallas side. One of the final games of Saturday's slate, it's RSL hosting Houston, and these are two teams I simply couldn't hate more at the moment, or couldn't just be less interested in, I guess, as far as trying to predict their outcomes. Because RSL, yeah, they beat St. Louis. It took a screamer as one of the goals that I saw. The first goal by, I don't even remember his name, honestly, against St. Louis. They got the job done, and now they're getting Luna back, but they're still inconsistent, right? Luna's going to have to be carrying. You have Agata, Russell, Gonçalves. I mean, it's just not a lineup that I care for. Luna's the only reason, and now he's getting talks of Celta Vigo rumors, right? All these teams now interested in him after his Gold Cup performances. So his time here is probably up sooner than later, but we'll see. And as far as the Dynamo go, I just don't get him. I will never understand this team. You saw Anali come back, and he scored a great goal using his pace. But there were a lot of slip-ups from San Diego in that game, and I'm just not going to overreact. Some of Houston's goals, I mean, you had a penalty goal, you had a screamer from Escobar, you had Anali's goal, which was very avoidable as far as off the corner kick. The ball was launched into the air across the field, and it hung in the air for about literally like 10 seconds, it felt like. And then Dos Santos as well for San Diego, the goalkeeper, had just an awful game as far as his ability to, or lack of ability to, recognize when or not to come off his line, and there's just so many avoidable moments. So I'm not going to really praise Houston too much, and maybe that makes me a hater for not, crediting them, but like I just don't. I'm not high on this team, but maybe with Anali back, we might see a more balanced attack as far as Linger, Ponce, Anali. McGlynn's going to be coming back into the fold from Gold Cup. Maybe they might show some signs of life as far as having a consistent style and not just relying on, McGlynn bangers, random set piece, like double dinks that they just find a way to, like, I want consistent patterns. I want like good soccer and good sequences that convince me, because otherwise these results are just the results are going to flip on you game from game, and that's what we've been seeing. So I have no idea who's going to win this one, but I think Luna has that top edge talent. He's been in great form. He's going to return to his side. That altitude advantage for RSL will do its thing, and I'm going to go for a 2-1 RSL win. To close out Saturday's slate, we get two of the OGs matching up in the Galaxy and DC United. And the Galaxy are coming off a great win against Vancouver, with Paintsel really taking the initiative in that one. And DC United, well, I mean, what more is there to say? Terrible MLS form. And they just got bounced out of Open Cup by Nashville after going up 2-0. Right? And that got Troy Lesens fired directly after the game. So you have this new coach bump that you could argue for DC United as really the only reason, because that just seems to be in any sport, like that is a thing. Because it seems like Troy, he probably wasn't backed by especially many of the supporters. We'll see if the interim or whoever, if the coaching change just does anything for this side's morale, the side's care as far as the season goes, trying to salvage anything. But it's a team that concedes goals. LA Galaxy, both these teams in bottom 5, I believe, as far as XG goes, season long at the moment. But LA Galaxy, of course, picking up form. They have the normal bit of rest. They get to stay home. DC United has absolutely no reason to contend in this match other than the fact that Benteke is back. Pirani, of course, scored a banger. They have something going in attack. But, of course, they played in midweek. They have to travel all the way to the West Coast on 2 days rest. And, you just can't really back them to win. But at the same time, the Galaxy's price in this one is just something you haven't really seen all season long. And I'm really not trying to take the juice on the Galaxy. So this is another one that potentially, like an over 2.5, could be a good leg for some sort of play you might like, or like a 2-leg or some sort of parlay. And that's something that I might consider. But I'm worried about how much DC can contribute on that short rest, because I want to see, what that lineup might look like, what the new coach might try to implement, tactically. And so that might be a lineup check for me as far as any potential play in this one, because I do still like goals, obviously, with Galaxy probably leading the way in that regard. But if they do have put out a full strength lineup, I still like this DC United side to contribute. But that's still, once again, a big question. Will they, and what will we see? So for now, I'm going to go with a 3-1 Galaxy win. Lastly, we move on to Sunday, which has just one match, and it's Sunday Night Soccer between St. Louis and Portland. And Portland won this meeting back about a month or so ago against St. Louis at home, 2-1. And that was right after, or maybe not right after, but shortly after, I believe, Melberg got fired. And once again, I've been preaching it. Look at these results since then. These last 5 games, which I'm pretty sure have been, maybe there's one more game, like I said, between that Portland game where the interim came in. But St. Louis has been scoring. Home or away, I mean, they've been contributing. Portland, it seems like, has, of course, by the metrics, by the actual goals, have been not as free-flowing and not as clinical, but they've been getting results. They've been a little bit more professional, for lack of a better term, as far as picking up results. They've been in some close games. They took a red card 1-1 before they beat Colorado. Then they beat St. Louis despite giving St. Louis a lot of looks in that match. St. Louis was just, the players, you can't do anything as a coach when your players are not finishing chances that are high danger. And then gave up a very late goal being up against San Jose, Portland did. Random loss on the road to Toronto, but then got back right at home against New England. So I think being on the road as well, Portland's definitely more has a more potential to concede. St. Louis has been, once again, this midfield, especially the defensive midfield, is like decimated at the moment. And of course, you have those couple of center backs out who've been out for a while. But they've been contributing on their end. They've just been in back and forth games. And the clock is ticking, right? They got to try and pick up points. And I think we're seeing a little bit more of how St. Louis finished last season when they signed the Germans. And that's just the trend we're getting at the moment as far as their score lines. So I think this is going to be a good matchup on Sunday Night Soccer. You have Anthony out for the Timbers. And you also have potentially DaCosta, who was dealing with the shoulder injury last match, but wasn't subbed off by Neville. How much is that really a concern, or is it nagging him whatsoever? But I feel like he'll still probably go. And so it sets up for a really interesting matchup. And I think St. Louis definitely has the potential to contend for at least a point in this one. And I think these two teams do share the points. And St. Louis maybe gets just that little bit better back on track as far as the results go, even though it's just a draw. But they do get that home bump. So I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw on Sunday Night Soccer.